Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. This is Full Face Me. There will be another introduction shortly, at least for one of these videos. So I am putting this in front of the undervalued videos for both of my kicker and my DST videos, because I recorded those thinking I was going to do one video with both the kickers and the DSTs, and so things are a bit jumbled. I've also been working with some sound issues that I think I'm at least in a better place now than I was for those two videos. It's still not behaving like it was prior to me having removed all of my audio, pulled everything apart, but we're getting there, going through a lot of moving around of things, and so that's part of where it's taken me a little bit of time to get some of these videos out. But I just wanted to forewarn you that parts of these two videos, parts of those overvalued videos, may be a bit abrupt, may make parts of these videos also a bit abrupt. That's just how I ended up recording things, and so I hope that everything is all right. So depending on which position it is, which video, there isn't a true intro or a true outro for those, so my apologies for that abruptness, but it is what it is. Now let's go on to the pre-recorded bit and get to the good stuff. This is still a sound test right now. The previous portion for the kickers was good enough. There were some issues with it, but you could pretty much understand everything that was needing to be said. But if you've seen this portion already, you should know what I'm about to say, so you can skip ahead to the next bookmark unless you want to rewatch this again. This is the portion that will be in both the overvalued, undervalued videos. I am recording all of these within a relatively short time. I'm going to make some costume changes just so it doesn't look like I'm in the same outfit for every video, but things may get jumbled around with that. With that said, let's just move on to the DSTs here, looking at the overall position and how did the teams perform over the course of the 2022 season according to my EV ranked system. And you can see over here on the right the actual average fantasy points per week, how they would have ranked there. Color coding might help a little bit easier just to see some of the major differences. Quite a bit of shuffling around, as you can see at this position. We'll go through this in tiers, and there is one lone DST at the top tier. This would be a DST 9, essentially, here, according to the color coding. The New England Patriots are the lone team here at the top, followed by a second tier with 3 teams. So just like last year, we found that there were 4 teams that pretty much separated themselves, made themselves an asset to teams, and it looks to be pretty much the same here. Those videos are some of the first videos that you could find on my channel if you wanted to look at some in-depth analysis on each of the positions, but they're the first videos I've ever done, so there's a lot of information I tried putting in as short of a period of time as I could. They are what they are. But now this second tier of DSTs, according to the color scale here, DST 12s on average per week. Most weeks are going to be the Philadelphia Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys, and the San Francisco 49ers. Then we have one more tier here who's still making themselves a little bit different from the majority of defenses, putting a top 9 defenses in here, which I think was about what I came to last year. Is you kind of want to, at the very least, make sure that you're in an top 8, 9 picking position when it comes to the defensive teams. And those are going to be our DST 15s, according to the EV scale. Baltimore Ravens in at DST number 5, followed by the Buffalo Bills, Jacksonville Jaguars, New York Jets, and the Green Bay Packers. Then at the 10th spot here, we have the Kansas City Chiefs starting off with our DST 18s, followed by the New Orleans Saints, Seattle Seahawks, Houston Texans, Carolina Panthers, Arizona Cardinals, Denver Broncos, Tennessee Titans, Cincinnati Bengals, New York Giants, Washington Commanders, Los Angeles Rams, Minnesota Vikings, Los Angeles Chargers, Indianapolis Colts, Detroit Lions, Cleveland Browns, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Miami Dolphins to wrap that up. And these are all in the same tier. That leaves us with 4 DSTs that really stunk it up. I think it was about the same last year. Maybe it was a 6 or so that were at the bottom of the league, so within relative reason. And so I did do every DST for this analysis. And those bottom 4, the DST 21s or so on a weekly basis, are going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers, Atlanta Falcons, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Chicago Bears. And for a point of reference as far as looking at how these teams do each week and what the number 1 DST would look like most weeks, well, they're going to score within about 4.5 points on either side of 21.5 points, roughly. Then for the DST 6s, we're looking at about 11.5 points, plus or minus 1.5 to 2 points within that range, roughly. DST 12s are going to be 7.1 points. DST 18s would have scored you about 4.9 points most weeks. The DST 24s would have scored you about 2.2 points. And the DST 30s were really hurting you there, averaging negative 0.6 points most weeks, plus or minus 1.6. So anywhere from about -2, -3 to +1 to about +1 points. And so that is the ranges for those. Let's move on. As was or will be the case with my kicker videos, once again, you're welcome for the wonderful transitions in this video. Please forgive me for the structure maybe lacking in some of these videos. But the content is there, and so we are on to the top 3 undervalued DSTs. Coming in third place is going to be a team that came in 14th place on the EV scale, however, came in 20th via the fantasy points per week, the average fantasy points per week, and that team is the Carolina Panthers. Just as with the kicker videos, and opposite to the overvalued for these positions, I am going to be considered ties to be more of a positive thing for the undervalued defenses here, as they are supposed to be worse than the competition, not equal to. And for the Carolina Panthers, they had 3 top 6 performances, and that is certainly solid. They had another 5 top 12 performances, meaning that the Panthers DST was at the least not hurting your chances to win the week 50% of the time. There were 4 rather poor performances, but all in all, the head-to-head record here is going to be proof that saying that the Panthers were the 20th best DST in 2022 would be a disservice to the true value that they had as a fantasy unit for their teams when we pit them against the Arizona Cardinals, the New York Giants, the Washington Commanders, Indianapolis Colts, Cleveland Browns, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all teams who they are higher than via the EV, however, would be lower than even 7-10 spots lower than the Cleveland Browns via the average fantasy points per week ranking. We would see that they had a head-to-head record of 45 victories, 37 losses, and 9 ties. And coming in second on my most undervalued DSTs from the 2022 season, we have a team who, via the fantasy points per week, was ranked 16th. However, the EV scale has them ranked at number 11. And that team is the New Orleans Saints. Starting off the season with 6 straight 4-point performances, as you can see right at the top here where I have the New Orleans Saints highlighted, followed by a single-point performance, is not an inspiring look for a team that I'm putting as the second most underrated valued defense. It also almost surely caused you to miss out on the New Orleans Saints' second best performance of the season in Week 8, which was 16 points. Right here. That said, 5 solid 2 DST1 type performances down the stretch may have gotten some people on board for that Week 17 DST1 performance. Once again, it really doesn't look impressive, and the head-to-head record is not ultra impressive either, but it just goes to show how a consistent, boring even, DST can hang in there against the more boom or bust DSTs, which tend to get elevated a little bit on these lists when you're looking at the average fantasy points per week. And so when comparing the Saints to the Seattle Seahawks, the Arizona Cardinals, the New York Giants, Indianapolis Colts, and the Cleveland Browns, all teams that are higher on the average fantasy points per week list, we would find that they had a head-to-head record of 38 victories, 36 losses, and 2 ties. Now time for a couple of quick honorable mentions before we get to the number 1 DST, and those honorable mentions are going to be the Denver Broncos, who had an average fantasy points per week, would have been ranked 21st, however the EV scale had them at 16th. Cincinnati's DST was the average fantasy points per week, ranked 25th team, however the EV scale had them at 18. And the Tennessee Titans had an average fantasy points per week of 24. However, they would be 17th on the EV scale. Now it's time for the first ranked team on my undervalued DSTs list. Get ready to throw your remote, throw your laptops, hide your daughters, folks. You are not prepared for what team is about to come up here. They were ranked 19th via the fantasy points per week on average, and they came in at 13th place via the equalized value. This team is the Houston Texans. Enter in crowd noise. What? this is pretty much a case of the Houston Texans were like Carolina on steroids. They were neck to neck via the fantasy points per week, and they are in the EV scale as well, one spot lower for the Houston Texans on both of those scales. Just like Carolina, 20%, 25% of the Houston Texans' performances were detrimental to their fantasy owners. They also had 8 weeks, or 50% of their performances, that were top 12 performances, almost a carbon copy of the Carolinas DST. However, they did have a top 3 DST performance, which the Panthers did not have on their record and their resume. Little differences like that made an even bigger difference in the head-to-head record against the same exact teams that we saw Carolina go up against to end this head-to-head record. And so those teams were once again the Arizona Cardinals, the New York Giants, Washington Commanders, Indianapolis Colts, Cleveland Browns, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the head-to-head record against those teams was 50 victories, 35 losses, and 5 ties. That is 5 more wins, 2 fewer losses, and 4 fewer ties than the Carolinas DST. And so, just like I said for Carolina, and New Orleans too, although it may not look exciting on paper, these consistent DSTs should not be overlooked next season, most notably if they are able to get a few key pieces to improve them, and almost certainly a favorable schedule always goes a long ways. So don't be afraid if you're taking a late defense to just take a solid defense, one that appears to be in a weak division, and take a stab at them. And then if you get it wrong, you can strike the moment that you find a surprise DST, because there are always like 3 DSTs or so who nobody picked up, and they're available on the waiver wire, and they're surprisingly good, just like in 2022 defenses like the Philadelphia Eagles, which my rankings loved last season, and I couldn't get on board with that. Not my projections, not my rankings. But also the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Jets were in 2022, all teams that you could have picked up and finished as very, very strong DSTs. Just a little bit of strategy too. It never hurts to have a couple of flex spots on your roster where you could take a team like the Houston Texans and just use them as your safeguard, and then you can fill it in on weeks that they have tough matchups, just given the division that they're in. You can say, oh, okay, well, now we're going to have a couple of tough matchups coming down the road. What's a DST that's in a good matchup or who's doing surprisingly okay that I can take a chance on because I don't feel comfortable with this DST? Having those flex spots to play around and just pick up extra running backs in case of injury that coming weekend or something like that always helps, I think, to end up with a strong roster at the end of the season and a winning record as well, just by taking advantage of a couple of things instead of holding on to complete projects throughout the entirety of the season that never come to fruition. So thank you very much for hanging out with me, looking at my undervalued DSTs. Other videos for other positions should be available, and I probably said it at some point in this video, but if you want to see more about the EV system, check out the introduction to the wide receivers video for the overvalued wide receivers. I believe has that the longer video of the wide receiver videos for this series. Thank you very much and take care. I'll see you soon enough.